Planning a multi-day event or conference? Then you know how chaotic managing show content can get. Version issues, last-minute changes, and the post-show scramble to send out IMAG recordings. ShowSync is built to fix that. It's your central hub for managing presentations, media, and video recordings across your event, without the mess of cloud folders or lost file links. With ShowSync, your show content stays organized, your crew stays in sync, and your post-show video files are delivered faster and cheaper, so you can move on to the next big thing without chasing down drives. Learn more at showsync.ca, because your content should work as hard as you do.
The one thing someone will always remember is how they felt at an event. You can't measure sales unless you're working with a CRM. Who did your team meet with? Was it successful? Did a salesperson call them? That's what's going to prove your event success.
Welcome to another episode of Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Byrne, and if you like the content that we produce on this channel, wherever you're listening to it, please hit subscribe and leave a comment after the episode. It really helps us out to reach more listeners just like you. So today, I'm really excited to welcome Isabelle Camp, the newly promoted Global Head of Events at Cohere, one of the leading companies in the generative AI space. Isabelle brings over a decade of experience in strategic event marketing, having delivered high-impact enterprise experiences from global sales kickoffs and product launches to partner activations and pipeline-driving trade shows. Before joining Cohere, she held leadership roles at Demant and Big Events Incorporated, where she executed large-scale B2B conferences and helped align event strategies to business outcomes. Today, we'll dive deep into the topic of unlocking pipeline from strategic events, what it really takes to make events a measurable growth lever in today's B2B landscape. Isabelle, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Matthew. It's a pleasure, and I'm thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks. So, Isabelle, congratulations on your recent promotion to Global Head of Events at Cohere. That's a really exciting milestone. To start us off, can you tell us what initially attracted you to the world of event marketing and what it is about the industry that has kept you passionate over the years?
Absolutely. So I've always been a mix between a science brain and an arts brain. I love the creative side to events. So I really like diving deep and creating experiences where people come out of events and they're just in awe. There's nothing more thrilling than having a client, a customer, or one of your own staff members walk into a room for the first time, seeing the event before the guests arrive, and just their jaw dropping and having that an unveiling experience. And so that's really what fuels my passion and my desire in the event space.
I agree with you completely. That nice. I have a theatrical background. I'm classically trained that way. That made me sound very arrogant, but I have an arts background, and moving into this world is that sort of perfect mesh of uh, creativity and business objectives. So I definitely hear what you're saying about that. And so now that you're leading a global event strategy at Cohere, what was it about the company or the opportunity that made this the right next step in your journey?
Absolutely. So the AI space is ever evolving. If you're keeping up with the news, you know that every day is different in the space. And so you have to be so adaptable and flexible and constantly changing your strategy. That's what I really enjoy about it, is that it's always so challenging. Every day you wake up and it's a different day. Cohere particularly really piqued my interest because our founder, Aidan Gomez, actually wrote the paper Attention is All You Need, which was very groundbreaking in the AI space.
So let's shift to a challenge many event professionals are grappling with right now. Despite significant investments in B2B events, many companies are still struggling to clearly tie their event efforts to actual pipeline outcomes. Why do you think this is a disconnect between the event execution and measurable revenue impact, and how it continues to be such a persistent pain point?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are so many different stakeholders in the event space. As a professional, you have to balance so many different opinions, so many different objectives from each different team, especially when you're working on the corporate side of events. Um, there's so many different stakeholders that you have to manage. And so coming in with a clear objective is very important on the pipeline side. So there is a big disconnect because a lot of stakeholders or executives don't necessarily have event experience, or they don't know the details or the nuances of the role. Event professionals is a very niche role that not everyone can understand, or maybe people just haven't worked with it in the past. Not all companies have event professionals. Some people hire agencies as well. So there is a lot of work to do on the education piece in some instances. So if your organization, for example, isn't aware of what types of events you can do, what that role involves, and the breadth of how that can affect pipeline and how that can grow your metrics and business for you, there is a big learning curve for some individuals. And that's why I always say you have to market yourself and what you're doing, even within your organization, because
Hmm.
not everyone knows.
So how is that challenge shaping the conversations you're having internally and or across the industry right now?
Mhm. Absolutely. I think that you have to align it to your roadmap. So you always want to make sure you have a diverse set of events. Sometimes there's key stakeholders where you're planning an event if you're on the corporate side that isn't about pipeline. Sometimes there's events you have to do more so for brand awareness. So I think it's about give and take. If you are doing one event, it may be the objectives are brand awareness and engagement and just reaching a specific audience, or thought leadership as an objective. But some are more so pipeline based, and you always want to get those key metrics, and it's about tracking that. So I think it's just having that awareness up front, and being honest about those conversations. As an event professional, you don't want to promise and say that you're going to do one event and get key metrics when that's not realistic. You always want to be realistic and upfront and honest about what you can get and the value from them.
Yeah, I really love that emphasis you're putting on the key objective and how that objective can be very different for very different events. I think
Mhm.
you just sort of mentioned some events that you're doing for brand awareness, some that you're doing to literally drive pipeline revenue, and that education piece that you mentioned is vitally important. A, for your internal stakeholders, for you in a corporate internal role, but also from the sort of outside role, educating the industry that those are very different things. I think one of the things that happens quite a lot, and you can probably attest to this, is those objectives get mashed into one event or one strategy, and breaking up that strategy and being very clear about the purpose of whatever event you're working on is vitally important. Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I completely agree. And um, it's really helpful to set those out. So then once the event is over, you can also go back at the end and say, hey, did I hit those goals? You can really drive those metrics in your debrief meeting.
hmm So, look, you've worked across multiple industries and scaled enterprise event programs globally. When designing an event with a goal of, say, unlocking a pipeline, what strategic pillars do you start with? What's absolutely essential to get right from the beginning?
I think I personally work on a lot of pipeline and metrics driven events. I think a lot of professionals do. So it's really clear from the get go that you have to have strategic company goals set out, not just from the events, but it comes top down from the company. You have to really understand the company pillars itself, the company you're working for, or else you can't really build your event and make a successful experience without having that alignment company wide. It all starts from that. And I incorporate that into every event that we have. And so once you have that, it really dictates those finer KPIs and objectives that you have, because the whole company is aligned, especially if you're working on, for example, a committee. You have those key people that you are working with that will be in your corner to help drive that success. And so if you're all aligned and you all share the same company values and vision, you can incorporate that into your event, because quite often that itself falls in line with sales objectives as well.
Hmm.
Another pillar that's very important to me is just culture. Culture is a big part of events that falls into experiences as well. So whether you're doing a virtual event or you're doing an event in a country that's very remote, maybe you as an individual aren't used to that culture. It's something different. You really have to have the event reflect that culture and the people in the audience that's attending as well to make it a success.
And so, where do you see any sort of alignment gaps between sales and marketing in early planning stages? Like, is there a particular common misalignment that you start to see?
Yeah, I think sales and marketing have historically been two different departments that always typically have different goals. But when it comes to events, I always see events as kind of the merger between the two. And so you have to take the marketing objectives, which is often brand awareness and engagement, but you also have to take the sales objectives, which is the pipeline and the key metrics, and marry them together. So I'm often the conduit between the two, bringing the sales and marketing teams together to work together on these events. Because at the end of the day, the event's not going to be successful if marketing and sales are misaligned. So from the get go, I always rope in people from both teams and delegate tasks to them to make sure we are aligned and we're working together as a team to make it a success.
Yeah, I really love that personifying events as that sort of meeting place of sales and marketing. I think sometimes events get pushed into one or the other
Mhm.
as like a subdomain of. We've talked about it on the podcast in our panel discussions a few times that is meetings, events, conferences, is that part of like a subcategory of marketing? Is it its own thing, whatever it might be? But positioning it as the intersection of those two key business departments of sales and marketing, I think is really smart. So, I'm going to steal that idea from you, just so you know. Yeah.
Absolutely.
When it's not just another meeting, when it's the event that matters, you need a production partner who delivers. Byrne Production Services specializes in multi-day meetings, conferences, and large-scale events that demand flawless execution. From cutting-edge audio and video to stunning lighting and staging, we're built for your largest events. Take your production to the next level. Visit byrneproductionservices.com and request your proposal today. Enjoying the show? Don't miss a single episode. Follow Production Value Matters wherever you get your podcasts. And for bonus content, tools, and event insights, head over to productionvaluematters.com and subscribe. Stay sharp, stay inspired. Production Value Matters.
Event leaders find themselves walking a tightrope, balancing creative experiences with business KPIs. In your experience, how can you preserve the magic of the event while ensuring that it serves a clear business objective, like lead qualification or deal acceleration?
There are so many cookie cutter events in the business world. And when you're working corporate, there's a lot going on. Everyone's plates are full. You have multiple events you're trying to execute. You're juggling a lot. It can be very easy
Mm.
to just fall back into your template of going, I always do this. This is what works. This is what I know. Let's just do it and get it done with. But at the end of the day, that's not what's going to take your event to the next level. Yes, it may be easy, and maybe a few people won't notice. But if you want to get the pipeline and really take it to the next level, you have to stay away from the kind of normal run of the mill events and kind of see how you can push the envelope and push it outside of the box. So if you're doing, for example, a trade show, I think traditionally the majority of the audience probably will have been to a trade show at some point or another. And there are specific branding guidelines and assets that you can have in place at those. You can host a party, you can have a trade show booth. There's different avenues to make them successful. But I think what makes them really unique is playing up your company proposition, working with your entire team, getting them involved to kind of make a whole activation and a moment around it and a campaign, rather than just placing your logo in some spots and doing the traditional marketing. That's what's really going to elevate it. So I really like to um, think of fun, unique things to incorporate, whether it's playing off the location or if we're going to launch a product at this particular event or trade show. Who can we work with? What kind of partners or customers can we incorporate? What story or narrative can we tell to really capture someone's attention? And can we kind of transform the space that we're in? Can we kind of theme a cocktail party on a product launch and make it really captivating, bring in a unique experience for them, and just really leave people feeling like they were touched and magical? I always like to say an event is more about how you make a person feel. Someone won't remember what they ate at an event, maybe not necessarily remember the content you produce, but the one thing someone will always remember is how they felt at an event. And so if you can make them feel really good, they'll remember that as a successful event.
So is there a particular format or of an event that sort of struck that balance really well for you recently?
Yeah, I really like to have multiple activations for content. So if you're talking about a panel or customer or virtual or webinar, any specific content like that, it really depends on what your company objectives are for that. So if it's a product launch and it's a technical audience, working at a tech company, I love to have solutions architects on board. I find that specific role is really successful because they can really speak to a technical audience as well as a business audience. So I think as an event professional, you really have to understand the types of roles within your company and their job descriptions. So you can pull in the right content and the right speakers that's going to suit your audience really well. Not everyone is well suited to speak at an event and drive content. And I think what makes it more successful is when you know the speakers, what they can deliver, and help drive that content.
So when it comes to content design, then what types of programming or formats tend to generate the strongest sort of sales outcomes? Is it about, executive
Mm.
access, technical deep dives, peer-to-peer dialogue, or something else?
Yeah, I think it depends on the content, what everyone's selling, right? I hate to say it goes back to depending on your key objectives,
Hmm.
but I really find it's helpful to have someone who can speak to both. That's why I like having the role of a solutions architect who can really speak to the business side, but they can also really deep dive into the technical aspects. They can field both those questions from the audience, so it kind of serves dual purposes. Um, Coming from a tech company, it's great to have someone who can speak to engineers and the engineering team and really go into the technical areas. But I like to break out events by audience for that reason, because not all of the events for Cohere are going to have an audience base that are extremely technical. They're not all going to have that skill set or have an engineering background. So I find it's best to divide it up. And
Hmm.
for sales pipeline, I think it's good to have the more of the technical background, but then the sales team can go and follow up later on.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift into some metrics. Beyond registration numbers, survey scores, are there particular KPIs you trust most when evaluating an event's impact on your pipeline?
Yeah, I think pipeline is a really big buzzword. And at the end of the day, you can do so many different events, but the value of them comes from pipeline. And so you really have to be able to track that and have that skill set. So it's really important to track your events in your CRM. As an event professional, that's a really big game changer. I think if you're not doing that, you should really learn, get the skills. There's so many different tools out there to help you. Because at the end of the day, that's what's going to prove your event success, because you can't measure sales unless you're working with a CRM,
Hmm.
and you're working closely with your sales team from your events, because you otherwise you're not going to know if a deal is lost or won or closed, or if you got a deal from an event. Someone could be at your event and just happen to talk to a salesperson or book a meeting from it, and you could close a really big deal for your company from these. And I like to track all of that. So going into specific pipeline KPIs, I think everyone should track meetings. Who did your team meet with? Their contact information, their title, all the details. It should be tracked who they met with, how long, was it successful? Did they walk away with a follow-up meeting with you? You need to track all of that so that you can then bring that to your sales team and have them follow up with all of those meetings. You also want to track opportunities. So closed won deals that comes further along. You're not going to be able to track that the day after an event. And sometimes sales cycles can take really long or really short, depending on what company you're at. So that's why having a CRM in place and tracking sales from your events really helps you follow through in the long run, because sometimes you might not notice anything for a year later. It could be a month later. You don't know the cycle for that. And also, however your company measures life cycles. So if you want to track, did a salesperson call them? Did they follow up with leads? Is there an open conversation going with any of these leads from your event? Depending on the event, you should get an attendee list, and that's what turns into your leads. So you want to track that in your CRM and kind of follow up with them. You should be working very closely with the sales team and seeing where they're at in the pipeline.
Yeah, I love the fact that you emphasize the CRM and that long buying cycle. And to emphasize that if you don't capture those metrics and those little bits of data along the way, then I really feel like you'll never be able to tell that story. Because as you said, it's a long buying cycle, right? Depending on, I mean, maybe you're a SaaS company that, it depends on online advertising and demos and freemium models. But when for larger B2B companies, and like, look, I'm a B2B company myself, and my buying cycle for my customers is sometimes a year and a half out. So I've got
Mhm.
to track every time I've interacted with that person or that decision maker and track to where that conversation started and how that conversation went through that pipeline. Not to say that I'm expecting that they're going to make a buying decision after touch point number two, but that when they do make that decision, I want to be able to look back and say, well, what led to that decision so that I can replicate it over and over and over again to add some predictability to my business. And so I'm really glad that you emphasize that it's like, I think too many event professionals are to see, well, we tracked how many conversations they had and we didn't get a sale next week. So I guess it's not working. And to have that long-term view, I think is vitally important. Um, can you share an example of a metric or insight that you uncovered, an unexpected value, or even a missed opportunity after you started implementing this?
Yeah, I can't say a specific value, but what I can say is I really try and automate everything. Once you have this set up as an professional, you have a lot going on. You're not going to be able to track every little detail, follow up with every single staff member who is at your event, and kind of track where they are in the cycle manually. So you want to try and automate all of this. And so there's been some instances where I've had an event over a year ago, and we just did a small event, but it was very low lift. And I just set it up and I said, okay, team, here's the process. Let's automate it. We set it up, and a year later we follow through and there's a really big deal from it. And
Hmm.
it was a low lift event that you don't necessarily think is going to be the most successful or generate the most pipeline, but you get a one-time client that's right place, right time that shows up there, and you happen to be tracking that, and it just popped up in the system a year later. So it's really nice to have, and then you can decide, okay, well, that was a success and didn't really take me much time to plan that event. Let's do it again this year. Why not? We got a sale from it.
Hmm. And that's a and again, I'm going to emphasize the fact that you could look back. You could say, where did this deal come from? And then you traced it back to this, as you said, low lift event, right? And that informed a great decision by your organization to say, well, let's double down on that. It's, the kill or
Mhm.
promote model in marketing. So kudos to you for that. So one major handoff moment is always the post-event follow-up, and you alluded to this a little bit earlier. What have you found to be the most effective way to drive timely, personalized outreach that capitalizes on event momentum?
So I really rely on other team members heavily for this. I like to do as much in advance as possible because I'm sure I'm not the only one, but the day an event's done, your brain's already on to the next one. You don't want to think about follow ups and going through closing it out and reconciling things because you're just already on to the next event. And so ahead of time, before the event actually starts, I like to work with our integrated campaign manager. I like to set up those follow up emails and sequences in advance before the event even starts. So I determine the best content, I determine call to actions. If it's a virtual event, are we going to include on demand recording? So most of these follow ups to attendees are always going to be email based. And I really work with our entire team from product marketing, looking at the roadmap. What do we think would be the best call to action for these attendees coming to the event to follow through on? So I will incorporate that into the email right away, get the design work done, lay it all out. And then that way, once the event's over, it's just pre scheduled and automated to send. So the best time to send it is either the day of, right after the event ends, or the morning after. You need to hit them right away, or else they're going to forget about it. Just like you, they're done, they're on to the next thing the second the event's done. So they're not going to look back and remember something that happened 2 weeks ago in a follow up if you get to them late.
Mhm.
So even just one first initial outreach is good right away. And then you and your team can follow up later.
I love that. I always think of that post event follow up as like, and this is a long time ago, but like the dating world, right? Like you don't want to be too enthusiastic and you don't want to be nonchalant so much. And so I think that there's a lot of grapes that die on the vine because everybody's worried about following up too soon and seeming too eager. And so I love the fact that you guys have programmed it in the day of, or the morning after, right? Because as you said, that fickle audience is so ready to move on after 3 days on site at the conference. They came by your trade show booth. You treated them well. You built some relationship, and there's like, I feel like in the industry there's like this caution. So I can't get too enthusiastic, maybe it's because they fear being felt to be spammy. But I think the emphasis that I want to put on what you just said is really about like a quick, direct, and I'm assuming very short follow up. It's not like, here's our brochures and 60 facts about us, and thanks for stopping by our booth. It's more like, hey, it was really great meeting you, and have a nice trip home, kind of thing. Am I right in that?
Exactly, you're very right. And I always encourage everyone to have tools, some kind of marketing tool where you're able to track how many clicks you got, what was
Hmm.
successful. You can compare them over time and see what works for you and your content.
Hmm. So at Cohere, you're working with a fast evolving AI space where speed and adaptability are very critical. How has your environment influenced your approach to strategic events? Are you thinking about pipelines differently as the go to market model shifts?
So the AI space changes very frequently, and companies put out new models all the time. Engineers are always working on the next best thing in the tech space. And so I think you just have to be so adaptable and very fast paced. Um, so if you're working on a launch event, the timeline can change very quickly. It can move up very fast or it can extend later. You never know which date you're working with. So you
Hmm.
just have to be ready to go at any moment, which can be very challenging when you're juggling multiple events at once. So you have to be able to prioritize. And that's where it comes into understanding your company's overall strategy. So, what's the number one product we're marketing at the moment. How do we want to incorporate that into events? If it doesn't fall within the priorities, well, maybe we cancel a different event so we can move this one up because this
Hmm.
one's the priority. Because engineers work very quickly, and sometimes you're given very short notice to do a launch event because there's just simply not time and you have to go to market on a specific date and you just have to work with what you're giving with. So you have to be very flexible and
Hmm.
able to deprioritize and change plans very quickly.
Absolutely. So, looking at your bigger picture, and I'm going to talk about internal initiatives or business cases you found the most effective. And again, I'm going to put that in that context, which I love, and I'm totally going to steal, of the events being a department that sort of bridges the gap between sales and marketing. So, what sort of internal cases have you found effective in shifting the perception of events from a nice to have to an essential pipeline lever?
Absolutely. So there's a few really unique events. Being in the AI space, we have a lot of extremely talented individuals that are all over the globe on the engineering and research team. And so a unique event that I really enjoy that kind of shifted into being pipeline is we have all these engineers who present their latest findings and theses and work at these academic research conferences. It's groundbreaking studies, and these research conferences happen all over the globe and bring together these academics in the AI space and really showcase their talents and what they're working on and expertise. And so typically, an event like that wouldn't be something that generates pipeline or revenue, but kind of thought out of the box a way to get involved with this approach. And one of the key kind of success metrics has always been thought leadership for these. We're positioning engineers in our company as these thought leaders who are exceptional at their career. They're leading research teams. They're really setting the tone of and breaking barriers for what AI can do in the future. And so instead of just focusing on brand awareness and engagement at those types of events where they're at, how can we really generate pipeline from those and kind of source those kinds of success metrics? So we've really broken the molds per se for those types of events and kind of brought multiple activations to them and kind of shown customers that our engineers are working on some of the biggest challenges in the AI space and overcoming them. So that has grown pipeline in a unique way where you're going the non-traditional route for an event strategy.
So, unfortunately, we got to wrap it up, but I'm going to go back to that main pain point we opened with, which is for event marketers who feel stuck trying to prove pipeline impact. What are one or two practical next steps they can take today to better align their events with revenue goals and get buy in across their organizations?
Yeah, I would really work with the revenue operations team. I connect with them, with your finance team, and also the sales operations team to really make sure you have a marketing or events category in your CRM and you can track that. That's a major puzzle piece, and that will unlock a lot of things for you from proving your worth as an event professional, prioritizing events and deciding which events you should do in your roadmap, or maybe canceling some that weren't successful. That is probably the baseline to start with there.
Hmm. So, looking back on our discussion, one of the on some of the frustrations and challenges we see for event organizers, what strategies would you recommend, or what should we all be doing differently as an industry?
As an industry, I think you need to really think outside of the box. I think we're all creative, and it's about marrying the creative genius that we all have inside us with the methodical and metrics driven approach. It's always really fun to just host a great event where you're working heavily on design and the atmosphere and the look and feel, but you also need to bring that analytical approach to it, driving pipeline and thinking about the larger picture there, because that's what's going to make your event successful for your company.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Isabelle, for joining me on Production Value Matters. And of course, if anybody listening would like to access this episode or past episodes, please go to productionvaluematters.com where you can subscribe. And again, if you're on whatever platform you're watching or listening, hit that like, hit the subscribe, and share this episode with somebody who could really benefit from these insights. Isabelle, thank you so much for joining me today. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Production Value Matters, the Business Events Podcast, is brought to you by Byrne Production Services. To learn more about Byrne Production Services and how we can achieve your business goals, head over to byrneproductionservices.com. Thanks for listening.